Hello and welcome to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today I'm once again joined by the good old Nicolò Grasso as we kick off our little Miyazaki series with a review for Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind, one of the earliest Miyazaki films. This movie predates the creation of Studio Ghibli, and today we're going to break down just why we like the film so much. Even within the context of Miyazaki's career, this is a very, very interesting film in style and presentation, telling the story of a young princess who has to get involved in the middle of this big political drama as different warring factions try to create a pathway forward for an earth that is being consumed by toxic plants and evil bugs, all done in a very quiet and unique style. And I think today we had a really good conversation discussing why the film stuck out to us so much and why we appreciate it for what it is. As I mentioned, this month we are splitting between two smaller themes, smaller series. Originally this was going to be an official series, and then now we're just going to kind of do some connected reviews. This month will partly be Miyazaki reviews. We're going to be reviewing 3 Miyazaki films. We're going to review this, we're going to review Porco Rosso, and we're going to review The Boy and the Heron. And then on the other side of things, we are celebrating the end of The White Lotus. We're going to have a full episode discussing The White Lotus alongside some other TV episodes and other TV seasons we've missed. So overall, I expect those two themes to continue throughout the month. But without further ado, let's get to our review of Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind. Okay, Nick, I'm very excited to kick off our little Miyazaki series with Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind, one of his earliest features, predating even Studio Ghibli itself, based off a manga also by Miyazaki. A very, very passionate project, I'll say. I think that is very clear from the world building and from everything, but we will get into exact details. I'm going to kick it over to you first. On the podcast, we've previously done Grave of the Fireflies. I think I've established pretty heavily that I'm a huge Miyazaki and Ghibli fan. I have Ghibli's logo tattooed on my leg, so I guess I really am a stan. Nice. I'm fascinated. Your history with Studio Ghibli, your history with Hayao Miyazaki, and your thoughts opening on Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind.
I don't have that deep a history with Miyazaki, actually, or relatively speaking, for someone who loves cinema and has been watching it for many, many years. I actually arrived to it late. I want to say my first Miyazaki film was My Neighbor Totoro, circa 2018 to early 2019. It became a thing of shame for me. There were so many of my university friends who were not into movies as much as I was, but they loved Miyazaki. They were like, "Oh my god, Nick, Kiki's Delivery Service." Like, I haven't seen it. What? I was like, Kiki, but she is Spirited Away, right? Spirited Away. I was like, I haven't seen it. What? So it took a while. For me to get there. So early 20s, but what can I say? It's great. I think I've seen mostly the Miyazaki features. Not many of the non-Miyazaki ones, but yeah, I love the guy. I've grown to love him. I love the way he looks at art. I'm very excited. I want to say for this retrospective, around halfway through, I'll try and watch one of the documentaries that he's been a part of. But yeah, his sensibilities align with mine in some ways. I like how much he is pro-environment, pro-life, anti-war, anti-fascism, all those beautiful things that everyone should do and should have. And this is also, I want to say, fortunate or unfortunate timing, considering the horrendous OpenAI Studio Ghibli theft that has been running rampant on social media. But it warms my heart that there is a line in people's morality. And apparently Miyazaki's work is that, because I've primarily seen hate towards any single post that shares these Ghiblified images. But no, I like him a lot, and I'm excited to delve into his studio's filmography, some hidden gems, maybe. We'll see in it.
Yeah, and I think this is a great film to start. I guess I'll kick off with my thoughts, because it is a very interesting film just because of the size of it. I think that's the biggest thing on this rewatch that stood out to me, and I believe you've also seen this before. This is a rewatch for you also. This is, in many ways, obviously an early film in his filmography, very, very early film in what would become Studio Ghibli. Already, the sense of scope, the sense of world, the sense of lore is probably as big as it's ever going to get. I mean, he's going to get very artistic. We'll get to like Boy and the Heron, and he's had instances where like Ponyo, for example, how was moving castle, very big lived worlds, Princess Mononoke. This one, when it comes to politics, because ultimately following young girl named Nausicaä, lives in the Valley of the Wind, being surrounded by this forest of death that is poisonous to everyone, who's just growing, growing, growing. Then all of a sudden you get these warring factions. And in every way, this film really drops you right in the middle of the story, right in the middle of this political conversation, right in the middle of this battle for control, this debate of what do we do? Do we attack the forest and try to reclaim the world for humanity? Is that the right way to go about it? Nausicaa, who has spent a lot of time in this forest, which is also filled by these giant insects, which have caused many deaths, and they've attacked people and they've attacked villages. She has a very unique sensibility of it. Even just this world itself, we never really get a clear explanation of what happened. How did we get to this point? There are little details we learn here and there that kind of explain it a little bit. You can definitely pick up the pieces and build a structure of understanding here. But for a film that drops you again in the center of all this without explanation, without even really warm up, all of a sudden just these planes fly into the valley, destroy the valley, and you're in the middle now of this political fight for control between at least three different factions. You can tell that Miyazaki, within the manga of this, has displayed and built this entire world with all these complex characters and complex moralities. He does such a great job in this film that is rather short in embracing and getting the audience to understand exactly what is happening, to be engaging in these really, really complex themes, and these complex debates and perspectives. There's not even a lot of dialogue. A lot of this film is quiet. A lot of this film is music. A lot of this film is like flying around and just kind of experiencing everything this world has to offer, yet still it finds in these characters those nuances. I was really impressed with how this film handles scope in a way that I don't think Miyazaki, in his filmography necessarily, you would point to him as a director that handles scope in the level that this is, but almost flawless. And I assume that's because he just knows this material. He loves this material. He's built this material on his head, so he knows just how to guide someone through it in an hour and 40 minutes. But I was impressed by that, I'll say, just right off the bat.
Yeah, this was my second time watching it, as you said, and I share many of your sentiments. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite Miyazaki films, but I definitely respect it a lot. Again, I've said, people who listen to this podcast weekly know that I am not the biggest fan of sci-fi, and while this isn't necessarily sci-fi, it is adjacent to that type of world. You have the post-apocalypse. You have this belief that the world is going to die if people don't do something. You have the flying. It does remind me a little bit of Dune in some of the iconography, some of the like the spaceships that they have with the little wings and all that. But no, it's rather impressive just how well he tells this story, and we're going to see this in all of his films pretty much, just throwing you as an audience member into a lived-in world, wasting no time setting it up. You're going to figure it out by the way people talk, by their actions, by their clothing, by all of those things. You're going to figure out how things work, and it doesn't get lost in nonsense. It is definitely a case of a movie that's an animated feature film. It is not a kids' film. There is some violence in here. There is a lot of political turmoil that's going to probably fly over kids' heads. But I think it is what you mentioned, actually, which I find very important with his films, and you see it here very clearly, is that he's not a filmmaker who panders to children. Those films are accessible to them, but they're not meant for them. But if they do watch them, especially like something like this, which is not directly aimed at children, It has a very strong message that does come through, even if you don't understand any of the various like political parties. The citizens of this place, who are the flying people? Who are these ones? Ah, the princess who's dying. What's happening? Sorry, but it does lead to moments of quiet, of reflection, spurts of action that are very exciting, even to an adult, even to someone who loves action films. It's just such a great cocktail, right? Of a bit of everything that you want out of an epic, which it is, as you said. This is an epic film, but also very intimate. The story itself of Nausicaa and her quest to protect the Valley of the Wind.
Yeah, I mean, it's very funny. I'll say just off what you mentioned quickly that when this released in America, I want to say 85 or somewhere in the 80s, they cut out like 30 minutes of it and they tried to market it as just purely a kid's film. What a wild choice for a film like this. And Miyazaki, as we'll get to throughout this entire series, especially our next one is Pocoroso, a very, very political filmmaker, politically charged in every way, is not afraid to give his thoughts, including he's given thoughts on AI before. So before anyone goes on Twitter and is like, well, but I'm just respecting his artwork, he's very adamantly against that and has been for years and years. Um, this film is so Miyazaki has said before that his goal with this film was to empower young people. And I think that is one thing that is super, super clear with this. You mentioned the action. The action here is fantastic. The animation, again, I'm actually very similar to you. I don't really care for a lot of fantasy. I don't care for a lot of sci-fi. Like, I've tried Game of Thrones. That kind of thing is just not for me. Where it's super Dune, for example, not for me. It's just not, it's fine. This is super, super engrossing in all those ways, but I think it continually comes back to I really appreciate the characters here, especially Nausicaä, especially those fighting for these young people trying to fight for change against all these big government forces. I don't think it's that hard to look at Japan's history and see certain things, especially with nuclear warfare and just a very, very changing. And this is also something that's throughout Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki's filmography, so clearly that's on his mind. But having these sources, and especially young females, and you talk about feminism and empowerment, a lot of the main characters here taking this action, pushing for change, are female characters, and showing that if you fight, you can win. You can win against this enemy, against technology. It's inspiring. It does create like a narrative, and I agree this is definitely not my favorite Miyazaki. We'll definitely get into some problems I have with it. But if you want a really rewarding watch in that aspect that like builds a very strong moral, a strong story, a strong message of empowerment, I think this works really well. And I think that's like why this works for me, is it never gets lost in the complexities of this political turmoil. It's not like we have to hear a giant speech from everyone. It's very interesting watching this right after Mickey 17 earlier this month. I forgot how tied the endings of both films were. I was like, oh, this is just what Mickey 17 was trying to do. Didn't quite do it as well in that film, I will say. But I don't think any message in here is groundbreaking, but I think it is intriguing. But it never gets lost in like, we have to directly tie this to atomic bombs. We have to talk about the US government. And also boils down to a lot, as you mentioned, about environmentalism, right? It's not just about humanity and how we are killing the earth for humanity, but there is also a lot here about the killing of the natural world, our relationship with the natural world, how we can live in harmony with the natural world, and how some will choose not to do that. I also found it very poignant. One thing I'm dealing with, I think everyone is dealing with politically right now, is the frustration of like, having a different perspective of people in charge and control who are making actions who will harm all of us, right? If you destroy a water supply with an oil pipe, that hurts all of us. That doesn't just hurt you. So you can have your personal freedom to pick whatever you want to do. In this case, the Valley of the Wind is directly being attacked, directly being impacted, directly being hurt by the choices of these other people in control. And I found that to be quite poignant and quite relevant now, just that sense of powerlessness. But again, Miyazaki is taking that point and that overwhelming, what can you do? You're just this girl with a glider. You're just this small village. You're just this community against this huge army. How can you win against that? And giving you a story of empowerment. So I was quite moved by that. I don't know how you felt about that, but I was definitely like, this works still.
Same, same. And not only for the reasons that you mentioned, but also that at its core, it is a pacifist tale. Miyazaki has often said that he's a pacifist, and now that I'm thinking about it, I want to say that I haven't seen all of the movies yet. I haven't seen Porco Rosso, for instance, but almost all of his characters are non-violent. Like even the ones like Princess Mononoke, who engages in violent actions, it's more out of necessity rather than want. um, and so to have this entire movie that's hinging on, we have to avoid this war, like these three different factions are colliding together, we're being manipulated to be destroyed by this evil force, we need to fight against that, we need to fight by finding peace, not by killing each other until the last man standing, which is often what happens with general epic, right? You mentioned Game of Thrones, you have the Lord of the Rings, Dunes, and whatnot. They all culminate in big sequences, set pieces. Um, but in here, while you have some of that, which is also tackled in a very sensitive way, a little bit of humor added to it as well, but never making fun of the entire situation. With like the three little old men of the village who steal the tank. That was a nice sequence. But you constantly have Nausicaa who puts every single part of herself forward to prevent the lives of others from perishing. And the others is like a global other. It's not just the people of a village, it's neither the enemies, but it's also all of the insects. There's, I honestly, I I didn't remember this film very well watching it, because I think I watched it around the same time as Princess Mononoke, and both of them have kind of together blended together in my head. Sorry, watching this, I completely forgot just moments of, we would call them like lyrical beauty, that are in here. There's early-ish on this flashback that Nausicaa has as she interacts with one of the Oms, these gigantic insects, to her childhood, and the way it's colored, and just in general the colors of the Miyazaki films are amazing. I have a note about that in a sec. But just an entire sequence, you have so many moments of character building and little flashbacks like that, even elements that are cliched as hell about, predestination. There's a, oh, it's destined that there will be the person wearing this thing that will bring the peace in the world. All of those tropes of fantasy narratives, sci-fi narratives, that are done in such a genuine way that they almost feel fresh. But you get to the ending of the film, and the blind woman, the oracle, I don't know how to call her, of the village, she like understands, like it's happening, like the prophecy is being fulfilled, what we were promised is happening here. um, Again, with the feminist angle to it, the fact that it's not a old man with a beard, but it's young Nausicaa. And I'll just note about the colors as well before I forget. The fire in Miyazaki films, the explosions, the way everything just becomes this blinding rays of white and pink and red and yellow. It's so gorgeous. So gorgeous. For what's essentially his first non like, it's not a Lupin the Third. It's not one of those more like commissioned, let's say, almost project, but something that's very personal to him, like you said. Um, it fits so well with the rest of his filmography that it's crazy. It doesn't feel like an early feature. Also, because to be fair, he was 40 plus years old. It's not like he started with being 21-year-old Hayao Miyazaki in 1962. But yeah,
Spent decades and decades working on manga and TV series, so I appreciate
yeah.
that. I mean, the animation, the even just like the textures when there is an engine that fires up, the like bounce to the beam that goes back is so vibrant. The colors here are so exact, beautiful blues, beautiful greens that put into contrast. Like when there's blood, and you mentioned the violence, and this film does have a very interesting thesis on violence, even compared to other Ghibli films, where Nausicaa, who is in a lot of films would be just completely peaceful and is fighting for peace, loses herself to rage. And there's a scene where she stabs someone, gets in the middle of a stabbing, and she accidentally stabs his arm, and they're having a conversation, and the blood is just dripping down onto the sword, into her hand, and like on the floor. score, absolutely stunning. But I also really want to appreciate the sound design of this film, not just the score from Joe, not going to try to pronounce his last name,
Joe
jazz musician.
Hisaishi,
Is that
amazing.
This is his first film as creating the score. Jazz musician, very, very interesting score that is going to end up defining a lot of Studio Ghibli's iconography. And here it's fantastic. And again, very, very lo-fi. There's so many scenes of characters. I mean, the opening scene is her just in this forest, just sitting under this pod as it's just snowing down poison, basically spores. And it's just this gorgeous scene set to music with no dialogue, ambient noise. There's so many scenes like that really work. But I appreciate so much the animation, the complexity of the animation. Also, this film was made in 9 months. That's insane that this had a 9-month turnaround. Granted, a lot of the scenes are like already pretty much storyboarded from the manga, but still to draw the complex scenes, all this nature, the color scheme, and then be so thoughtful about, as you mentioned, the colors, when she goes and she gets all the yellow tentacles and it glows yellow. Those colors are so well thought out in their placements throughout the film to make scenes feel important. It really is like immediately you can see Miyazaki's craft as a filmmaker. I agree, this does not feel at all like a debut feature. In fact, there'll be films later on in his filmography that feel far more debut than this is. This is really off to the races very quickly, in a way I really appreciate. But like I think so many pieces when you talk about cinema, especially animated cinema, just like get overlooked. Again, the sound design, the score, colors, but here they're all absolutely spectacular.
Even performances.
Yeah.
I'm no Japanese speaker, but I don't know if you watched the English dub actually of this. I've not
I've
seen a
never
single English dub.
I've never seen an English dub for a Ghibli film.
Yeah, but they all fit. It's never the whiny cliche that some of the animes that I watch sometimes. It's like the super high pitched and annoying occasionally. It's well balanced.
Oh my god, Sumi Shimimoto as Nausicaä is like fantastic. Just how they treat her character in general. I also appreciate that like there's some anime sensibilities. I know you had an issue with Weathering with You. I don't really get that in the film, but like there's no real like sexualization of these characters. Like it's very, very well handled with how they craft these characters.
There's no love story. Oh
No love
my
story.
baby Jesus! I forgot that there's no love story when the kid appeared halfway through. I was like, was there a love story? Tell me no. It's like, no, okay, it's not. Even though I would say, I don't want to. Maybe can we jump into negatives a little bit?
Yeah, go for, of course.
I'm not super big on that character of the kid from the other tribe.
Yeah.
Pajita, don't remember the name. Like the one from the plane that crashes. There's a
Yeah.
princess like destroy the thing. Yeah, I think that whole section of the narrative kind of drags a little bit because you add him. They have to go to his hometown. The hometown is being destroyed. There's a people. They kidnap Nausicaa. Is trying to no, don't do this. We have to save the people. No, stop you. It's like it's the only part where it feels a bit too long for its own good. Which doesn't mean that they need to remove that character altogether, but maybe keeping it slightly more focused between just the two factions, because this addition of another faction muddles the water a little bit, adds some extra runtime. That's not the most exciting. I think like the first half, for until they fall into the quicksands, I'm like, this is amazing. Then that sequence underneath the Sea of Despair, how they call it, is also very nice. You know, when she understands how everything. Oh, like okay, this is why it's pure underneath and it's coming from upstairs and blah blah blah. But yeah, it's when you feel the brakes being altered a little bit. I don't know if you feel the same, maybe.
Totally. I mean, I think this is the film, and like I really do like the film overall. So take this as like in context of how big of a complaint it really is. But every story update, every plot progression is less interesting than what they were doing before. So in like A+ with just exploring the Forest of Despair, this little slice of life with Nausicaä, trying to navigate life here, like that was all great. And then they had the first faction, which is fine. And it was good. Like, okay, we're going to this story about military control. Again, also very relevant in some ways with colonialism and stuff. Like, it was super interesting. And then you add this third faction. And it's not even that the third faction is bad. Like the actual content they provide and move the story to its grand climax is good. I like the ideas. It just, again, I agree with you. It goes a little too far. She goes to them and then she gets captured, but then she immediately gets led out. I was like, just cut the capturing part. There are times where, again, this film moves so quietly and it moves so slowly that when you get by the end, there are sequences absolutely that begin to drag. And it does feel like the film has a weird relationship with momentum, with pacing. You get to this film and you get probably a halfway in, and it doesn't necessarily feel like you're halfway into a movie. Like it doesn't feel like it's building and then the third climax just kind of comes out of nowhere. They're building that there's a plot happening, they're building that there's this climax, but really until you go to this other village right towards the end, you don't really understand like what is happening. You don't get the answers to what are we building to. It just kind of feels like you're casually going through this life, and then you get the stuff with the insects at the end, which I do love. I think the insects at the end, it's a great third climax and like third act climax in pretty much every way. But I agree with you. I think that was my biggest issue also, is just some of the pacing. I would not, this is one of the few Ghibli films that I probably wouldn't show to my kids, at least until they were a little bit older. I think a lot of kids, especially with modern sensibilities, but just in general, would be pretty bored by this project.
Totally.
If it was, again, mostly exploring almost like in an annihilation way, her going into the sea of despair and exploring all these great creatures. And I think there's even a lot there that you can get into when you talk about the dynamics of how the poison interacts with the plants and how they're cleaning actually the soil, and how if they grow in clean soil, it's not actually poisonous. So it's not really the plants or insects that are to blame. That's all like magical in a way that I could spend 10 hours in that world. It's everything else that begins to just feel a little bit worthy, but not quite as intriguing. And I also think like the takeaways here, when you really get to it, are pretty simple. Like it's not like this film is one of grand complexity. There's a lot here to talk about. And I think especially the environmentalism is displayed in a really interesting way. I would struggle to look at this and build like a feature about why it's so impactful or why it's so interesting compared to other films around this time. Um, it's good, but I just don't think it's quite. I also think like it clearly is, and again, I think Miyazaki does a great job handling this in the context of the runtime, but it's just so clearly a bigger story. It's so clearly a bigger tale that is trying to be squeezed together and just is bursting at the seams. I've never read the manga for this. I would love to read the manga and see what else is here, because I think like if this was, a whole story, you could really just flesh out every character, every faction, spend so much time with Nausicaä building all these different, she goes to the other lands and she spends way more time there. Like that could build to something really, really epic and worthy, because this is an epic story squeezed into a film that is not an epic runtime, and I think that does hurt it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I will say in defense of the simple messaging, I find that almost to be a trademark, a positive trademark of Miyazaki. He could get lost in trying to be a bit more grand, but also all of these stories, even the ones that get a bit more complex, because even Howl's Moving Castle has some similar themes about anti-militarism, anti-interventionism, and all those things about preventing a war. Um, he manages to always end on such a simple and easy to grasp note. I think of the movies that I've seen of his, only only The Boy and the Heron was not immediately simple to grasp, and it led to multiple people that I know saying that they didn't really like the film that much. It's like I didn't really get what it was about. It's like, oh my god, you really need like the silver platter with the here's what it's about. It's like Nausicaa does end with that, even throughout it. But I don't know. I see that as a strength of the narrative, in a way. I think other stories, like we talked about Dune and other ones, get probably too big and a bit. It's easy to have the message be muddled. I think in a way it's
Yeah.
harder to make a film this grand to have such a understandable, easy to digest a moral. We could even call it a moral, to be honest. At the end of the 110 minutes, whatever of runtime, then yeah, like people still arguing about Dune Part 2. I don't think it's a complicated ending per se. I think it's just the way it's made. It's not clear. I think it should be clear. I think it's dangerous for Dune Part 2 to not have a clear ending of what's happening, which is why I'm glad that this one does. For
Yeah.
comparing Nausicaä with fucking Dune Part 2 here. Just two completely different things in some ways. But you get my gist.
I don't know if I would say completely. They're pretty similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like weirdly similar actually when you really break it down in some ways. I agree. I mean, like I do think it's more impressive to create a story like this and have it be more clear. That's what I want. I guess I'm just saying like when you compare it to even just Miyazaki's other work, like the complexity of what's like when you look at. Have you seen The Wind Rises?
I've not. It's on my watch list. I
Okay.
want to finish it all for this month. It's like that, Porco Rosso, and Castle in the Sky, I believe, are the only ones left. Yeah.
Oh, and I'm rewatching Castle in the Sky this week also because it's I think my least favorite one, but I'm like willing to give it another go. Castle in the Sky, watching after this, keep in mind that they were told by America that this was not friendly enough for children, and that one they make a lot more friendly for children,
Fair.
and digestible for children. But I think like when you look at The Wind Rises, and I won't get too into it, but about this guy who makes planes for World War II, and then has to. It's a very simple message in a lot of ways where he has to deal with like, oh, I'm creating art, but that art is literally murdering people across the globe. How do I deal with this as an artist? Um, there's more to chew on than this, which is very straightforward. Like it is bad to kill nature. Okay, we got it. And again, effective, completely effective. Even like Princess Mononoke has a lot more complexity with the morality of like their villains, where there really isn't a villain in that film. This very much so has like, you are the villain, you murder innocent people, you're trying to kill this. Like it's way more simplistic. And again, it's not bad by any means. I just think when you talk about the context of Ghibli or Miyazaki, it's very easy to see why this one falls to the wayside. And I'm curious if there is more complexity in the manga. Because if you
Maybe.
flesh out these villains, if you give a little bit more scenes of dialogue or you give more, I think there could be a little bit more of intrigue there. But I mean, I'm curious. Because also, I mean, I agree with you. I don't necessarily need a 10-hour version of this.
The Netflix live action show, Nausicaä, I'll
Yeah.
win. I think the problem, I mean, and I use the term very lightly, problem. Maybe the reason of your criticism probably stems from Nausicaa herself, because I was thinking about the other films, and almost none of the characters are as clear cut as she is. Nausicaa, from the opening scene when she finds the husk of the home, and you mentioned that beautiful sequence of her just like hiding under it and watching all the spores fall. It's the same Nausicaa at the end who sacrifices herself. She's not the whiny children from Totoro trying to process the illness of their mother. She's not Princess Mononoke trying to process everything that's happening. She's not Kiki who becomes depressed and overworked. Like she's not all of this kind. She's not Ponyo with the father issues and stuff. Maybe it's because of that, because she's very simple.
Yeah.
Hence,
She's also perfect. Like, she is a superhero here in like the worst of ways, where like no matter what the situation, no matter who's in harm, Nausicaa will single-handedly create a plan, or just on her own without a plan, save every single person. To the point where her village is like just they're like, oh my god, the princess is smiling. We're good. Like we don't even have to worry that we're in a crashing plane, gonna crash into a field of poison.
just wait and trust.
She's here. We're good. Like it's a very, very lacking complexity character. I actually, I think you really have hit the nail on the head with that. Yeah, that's probably a really good point to bring up.
It's the main thing, because I was thinking, like, I was like, why are the others working better? Like, I haven't seen again the others that they
Yeah,
mentioned, but I was like, yeah, like all of them, like even Owl's Moving Castle, even Spirited Away.
yeah,
There's always this journey that the characters go on. Here, there is the journey, but it feels like it's more an external journey than an
yeah.
internal one. Again,
And they probably could
maybe
have done
different
more
in the
with
manga.
her.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could have done more with her rage. I guess I'm sure there's more in the manga. I think I've not seen, but because they do introduce that as a character fault, and they just never really return to it. She very quickly is just like, well, actually, I don't want to do rage anymore, so I'm not going to do it. That kind of disappears very quickly.
Even the death
I
of
can
her
see that.
father, I want to say that's the first time we see the father, right? Because at first I was like,
No, we
we
have one
barely,
scene with
or like one
him,
scene with the old lady. It's like,
and they never
that's
really
it.
deal with that. Like I don't even know why he's really there because they just like they introduce him in one dialogue scene where he's just established to be king, and then they murder him, and then we never hear about them really murdering the king again. I guess she does have, again, like maybe that emotion is what pushes her to the rage, but like I feel like there are other ways to get there. I agree, it's a very strange that is strange.
Uh,
um Still, I mean, I think those are
Still
minor,
works.
right? Like still
Still
works,
works.
still bangs. Still highly recommend. But definitely a little bit, I guess, maybe more awkward than it appears on a first viewing.
Now I'm curious, which films from Miyazaki would you say feel more like a debut?
Castle in the Sky.
Ah, okay.
Let me pull up the filmography. Castle.
Because
I don't like Castle in the Sky again, but I'm curious what you. I'm also curious to revisit. I've only seen it once.
it will be interesting. I genuinely thought back in the day that My Neighbor Totoro was his feature debut. It has that
Yeah,
vibe of like it's so low scale, it's so simple. The Studio Ghibli logo is Totoro, so in my head it was like, oh yeah, it's the first film, of course. Of course, but then apparently no,
yeah.
just retroactively added to the Blu-ray versions and the ones on Netflix.
That movie is so weird because I could see that or an argument that it's like a debut film and it's just so simple. It's so remarkably simple, but it still works like so remarkabably well. Like it is
So good.
undeniably 5 stars for me, and I'm like
Yes.
comparing this where I'm like, well, there's all these nuances and all this depth that like Totoro does not even try to do any of that. But still sticks the landing so well. I would say those two. I would say, and to be clear, this is not his debut. He has Castle of Cagliostro before this. Let's be clear.
True.
That's a really fun one. You should watch.
I
I can
want
see
to, yeah.
Kiki being a debut. Kiki is a little bit simpler. Kiki is a little bit rough around the edges, I would say. Howls. I'm not a huge Howl fan, but outside of that, I mean, it's a legendary filmography. You're kind of picking at like, this film is weaker. Even Nausicaa saying that this is weaker. I still gave this like what, 4 stars, probably probably a 3.5. Like it's still a very, very strong
If
film.
it came out nowadays from whatever studio trying to bring back to the animation, it would be hailed as a
Oh yeah.
masterpiece and a return to form. And it was his first feature film, kind of, for Ghibli. Or like it's put together in that package, which is also confusing because I watched this on Netflix. There's all of them on Netflix. I was like, oh, Ghibli film. And then I was reading online. It's like, oh no, it's not. But they
Ghibli
just
now, I
put it
think.
together. I think because the style is there, the themes are there.
Well, I
He
think they
made it.
distribute this officially now, but like it's the crew that made this is who made Ghibli. It's just after Nausicaa, they were like, well, what if
True.
we form a studio because we really like working together and it's easy. Like, so it is basically a Ghibli
The
film in
rest
every
is
way.
history.
Just the rest is history. Also would highly recommend that you watch some of those other ones because, like, especially Isao Takahata has so many good films on his filmography. Pompoko is so good. Pompoko, respect. Grave of the Fireflies is excellent. Definitely
Oh yeah.
some good stuff in there, and I'm excited to get into more Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli throughout this month. I guess final thoughts on Asuka, the Valley of the Wind. I still appreciate this. I know this was kind of a conversation where we got into some negatives here at the end, and that all rings true of why it's a weaker Ghibli film or why it's a weaker Miyazaki film. Still, such a fascinating style. Really, really accomplished as a sci-fi fantasy epic adventure squeezed into a shorter runtime. I would say I would love to see this on the big screen. I
Yeah.
know they just released Princess Mononoke in IMAX. They do the yearly Ghibli-a-thons at theaters, but that's like a whole expensive thing you have to pay for. I know Mononoke is in IMAX this week, just like not as Fathom event, so I much prefer that personally. But I think the like flying scenes are spectacular. Again, the textures for everything, the complexity of the animation. I just know in IMAX this would look stunning projected on a giant screen, rather than just my TV. So still highly recommend this. And a good start, I think, to introduce yourself to some of the themes, some of the techniques, some of the world building that Miyazaki's gonna use and perfect throughout his filmography. It definitely is like a really good start, and it's nice seeing that he's going to take pretty much every idea from this and eventually get it to like being an A+ execution. So I appreciate it for what it is. Nick, do you have any final thoughts on Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind?
Yeah, I'm very glad I rewatched it because, as I mentioned, it was cold in my mind. I didn't remember it very clearly, and yeah, it was very much worthwhile. it's not as focused as I would like it to be, but also who cares? It's a good film. It's a very good film. Very relevant now as it was back then. I think especially the theme of environmentalism, or even the one of anti-war. It's always relevant, but even environmentalism. Just the idea of destroying this rotten world is dying again and again because of humanity who can't who is actively poisoning itself the world. Very straightforward, but also very heavily metaphorical in a way. Um, yeah, it's a very good start. Like I'm excited to finally delve deeper into the rest of Ghibli and finish Miyazaki's feature work.
Yeah, and again, just also very empowering, very hopeful. It's a very hopeful film.
Very
Did you stay?
hopeful.
Did you stay for the end of the credits?
Always. I always watch. I just
Wow.
generally I love the end credits. I'm an end credits kind of guy. I just like to sit there and be like, wash over me, let the music play. But and I love how every single time you basically have these little epilogues during the end credits. Uh,
Yeah. With Ghibli
Delightful.
films, worth it. Different vibes. I'm always out of there by the second credit that rolls. I could not care less.
Who's the
But
best boy,
for this,
Carson? Who's the best boy?
that's true. That's a good point. You can stream Nausicaa the Valley of the Wind wherever you can stream most Ghibli projects. In America, it's on Max. Internationally, in most places at least, it's on Netflix. This was on Netflix, you said, right?
Yeah, all of them
Okay,
makes
perfect.
all the Ghibli because like Castle of Cagliostro, it's not.
Yeah. And I think there was it was this or there, I think there's one other one that there was like some issue with because they sold the rights at some point to someone else, but I guess it's not this one. So go check it out. We'll be back. We have again more Miyazaki breaking down. Next up, Poco Rosso, jumping deeper into his filmography. One of my favorite films of his. Very politically charged. I'm very excited for you to see it, and I'm so excited to revisit it myself. Let's go to our question of the week, asking what is your favorite post-apocalyptic film? This is a very interesting film in that genre, and I'm curious what other features have inspired us. Nick, what is your favorite?
Since we have some time, I have a list. No, I won't say too long, but I basically have a three-way tie that's actually a four-way tie. Um, of course, I have to mention Mad Max. I do love Mad Max the Road Warrior, as it's known. Just because of the tangible nature of it. It's also tactile. It's also lived in. It's also real. Shot on location. It looks dangerous. It looks dirty, and just the feeling of hopelessness in that world is amazing. But I do think, as of now, my favorite film in the Mad Max series has become Furiosa. I think about that film a lot. I absolutely love it and love the mythology behind it. In terms of something that's an adaptation, I do love the book more than the film, but even the film is very much a great film. It's The Road, based on Cormac McCarthy's book with Viggo Mortensen and Cody Smith McPhee. Just dour, just depressing. Probably one of the most plausible futures, post-apocalyptic futures. If we're not too careful, this is likely what's going to happen, at least in the States. Sorry, Carson. And then for a more fantastical type of post-apocalyptic film, which doesn't really get that much mention and that much love, but I personally really like the film and really like the director's work as well. Have you ever heard of 2010's Stakeland by Jim Mickle?
Never.
It's basically post-apocalypse but with vampires. There is like one that has a sci-fi twist similar to that. That's with Ethan Hawke and Willem Dafoe, which is a good film. Daybreakers, I believe, is the title. But Stakeland is basically road movie, vampire epidemic. The states are completely covered with these blood sucking creatures, and you have this basically Mad Max with vampires. It's great, very dark. But this director, Jim Mickle, always manages to create compelling twists on known genres, whether it's like time travel, crime noirs, cannibal horrors, vampire action films, and this one is very underrated, I would say. So, Stakeland, little treat.
I'll have to check that out. I also have a little bit of a list here. I will start because you started with it. Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, so fun. Love that. Definitely my favorite of the originals. Actually, probably my favorite just overall. Fury Road is really good also, but absolutely like very campy, very queer. Everything I look for and this, to be very clear, is obviously not my favorite genre. I don't think that is a shocking revelation. This is exactly what I want, where it's just like fun. There's definitely meaning here, but quite well made. 10 Cloverfield Lane, of course, I really enjoy. Very, very isolated. Just like such a great peek in what the Cloverfield franchise could have been. Such a smart script. Great, great, great performances. Sad then we just went into what we went into, but we can leave that for another day. Jack is not here. I have to mention The Matrix. I think that's like an obvious one we don't need to get too deep into, but that entire all 4 films, stunning, 5-star cinema across the board. Planet of the Apes, I really like the original series. Not like every film is great in it, but I think it's actually like a quite rewarding series to watch all of, and how it wraps around at the end. I enjoy. And then finally, I don't think you've seen this. You really need to watch this, as everyone at home also should. 2022's Biosphere.
Oh no, I've
Starring
not heard
Sterling
it.
K. Brown, starring Mark Duplass. Do not read too much about the film if you're going to watch this. A very small, isolated film. Again, kind of similar, almost 10 Cloverfield Lane in scope, where they're trapped in this building. They're just trying to survive. They don't really know what has even happened outside or what the status outside is, but it is post-apocalyptic. And strange things begin to happen to them inside the house. Very, very, it goes places, I guess is all I'll say. Definitely a shocking watch, but definitely very worthwhile. I appreciate both Sterling K. Brown, and I especially appreciate Mark Duplass as an actor. I think he often does not get the flowers he deserves. And this is a really great film starring him. So highly, highly recommend. Again, if you're going to go into it, do not look up what it's about, or like don't look up the spoilers. Just go in as blind as possible, and I promise it will be at least an interesting watch. I would like to think worthwhile, but it will certainly just at least surprise you in certain ways. With that, Nick, rapid reviews, anything we've seen recently that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I know you've had a pretty busy week, but what have you squeezed in viewing wise?
I was busy with my, as I mentioned in the last episode, trying to clean up my movie leaving soon list. I still haven't been able to watch all 17 films, um, but I was able to watch Jesus You Know by Ulrich Seidel, documentary, Austrian documentary, not too great. My second Ulrich Seidel. I like his style in the way that he's very matter of fact, kind of playful, with just letting weird people talk about, in this case, like their faith and what they're praying for. It's very bizarre, but it was a bit too talky without much change to the images for me, which sounds like a weird complaint, but I'm also a bit sick today, so not the best watch. But I also did watch 2 of Jacques Tati's films, both Monsieur Lo's Holiday and Mon Oncle. I don't love the guy, but they're just cozy films. Just the attention to detail in them, the pacing to getting to those visual gags. I read someone's review where they said that the films are the funniest comedies that never make you laugh, and it's spot on because you're just constantly amused. There's almost never a time where I just like go, haha, like that, or like, oh, but it's just warm. It just makes you feel warm. Jacques Tati, man. And also, I did watch one um, Eric Robert film. There were a bunch that were leaving movie, but I did manage to watch La Collectionneuse, which is very dark drama about pigs of men obsessing over this young, openly sexual woman. Um, I was not expecting it to go to the places that it goes to with its themes and characters, but it's rewarding. I will say that, and just the way Romero shoots bodies and places. I think especially Carson, there's a lot of Call Me by Your Name in its cinematography and the visuals, like these 3 people stuck in this gorgeous French villa, just spending their summer days trying to do something and do nothing. It's worth a watch. And lastly, Honorable mention. There's a new Scott Barley short film. I'm a big fan of Sleep as Our House and his entire filmography. People who love avant-garde experimental filmmaking. I know, Carson, we talked about how it's not up your alley, but for people who do like it, A Ladder from Scott Barley is unavailable, so go watch that. And lastly, for my podcast Anatomy of an Adaptation, I rewatched actually Childhood of a Leader, Brady Corbet's feature debut based on Jean-Paul Sartre's short story slash novella, and it's great. I need to rewatch Vox Lux because I haven't seen it since 2018. It's now The Brutalist. I love The Brutalist, but Vox Lux I have fond memories of watching in Venice with people booing around me. But yeah, no, Childhood of a Leader is a special debut. Just so self-assured, so confident, and so fucking dark and relevant. Highly recommend.
I still have songs from Vox Lux on my phone. What a film! What a performance! It was an experience. That'd be a good
True.
podcast one day. For my rapid reviews, I'm going to start with two that are going to have more bigger conversations on various episodes of ClapperCast. So going to go move through them pretty quickly. First off, speaking of films you should go in unspoiled for, Mark Waters' The House of Yes, starring Parker Posey. And this is a film that kind of started getting more conversation around her work with The White Lotus, and she's killing it in that show. But this film started to get talked about. And Paul texted me, and he was like, do not go on Twitter to look like, do not go on Twitter. Do not scroll about White Lotus before you watch this movie. Go in completely unspoiled. And I did. Wild film. So fun, so campy, a lot of genuine emotion, very, very dark. For a world where there are so few films about Thanksgiving. And this is really what it boils down to, is a guy is bringing his fiance home for Thanksgiving to meet the family. This film is like a campy nightmare in the best of ways. Go out, seek this out, watch it. Do not get spoiled. Truly just an insane film that we're going to be reviewing on Patreon this month. I also was convinced to watch the show Adolescence on Netflix from the same team that made Boiling Point. Fantastic movie that is. This is 4 episodes. Every single episode is truly a single shot, not like edited sneakily or using CGI. Truly just one shot about this boy who murders a classmate, and every single episode is a different take from different months apart. There's months between each episode. Understanding the process of finding out what happened, talking to his schoolmates, trying to find the murder weapon, etc., etc. Interesting show, really great filmmaking, excellent performances, screenplay left me a little baffled here and there. I think it's quite underwhelming. Socially, what this reminds me of, because everyone is losing their minds, being like, this is such a good look at what's happening with toxic masculinity and violence towards women. This show is way better than the show I'm going to reference, but it reminds me a lot of when 13 Reasons Why released on Netflix. I don't know if you remember, Nick, but when that released, oh my God, everyone lost their minds with like, this is the best look at suicide and depression ever put on film. We can't talk about it in schools. Or some people were like, you need to show this in schools. Similar to this show, people are like, show it in school, show it to Parliament, show it to everyone. People need to see this. And it's like, very clearly the people involved with this have never really talked to kids. As someone who works with teenagers every day, very clearly they did not necessarily talk to a lot of teenagers. It's very like adults reflecting on this thing they don't really understand. And I just think the screenplay leaves a lot to be desired, but I see why it's so popular. And I do think because the filmmaking, it's worth a watch, but not necessarily my favorite thing in the world.
Yeah, just
And
the amount of love behind it has killed my interest in it. It's like, it came out, I was like, oh, this looks interesting. And everyone was like, it's the best thing ever. Oh my God. But the moment when people on the radio start talking about Netflix shows is when I'm like, I'm done. Squid Game, not watching it. I'm sorry. So I might watch Adolescence. It looks interesting. I am afraid of what you're saying. It's like the reasons why I didn't watch. I was like, I don't know if I really want to go into this. Honestly, they are also, to be fair, you are in the States. British kids are very different. Maybe.
Oh my God,
they speak their own language.
Is that if I need actually someone from, I need like Jack to watch the show and tell me, is this how the schools are? And it seems, respectfully, with all the love in the world, like a nightmare. It seems like hell on earth. And I'm like, is this how kids are in the UK? That's crazy. Would recommend. I mean, again, I do think it's better than like, way better than Squid Game, way better than 13 Reasons Why. Like, it is worthwhile. It's just if you're breaking down the nuances to see that grand power within it is where I think it begins to fall apart. The two older films I watched that will not be discussed on ClapperCast, Lizzie Borden's Born in Flames, 1983. Not sure if you've seen this docufiction about this world where we're 10 years after this big war for equality, and there are all these kind of warring factions of female leaders trying to understand or decide what's going to happen. How do we build a society now? At the same time, you have obviously white conservative America still underneath, boiling, trying to figure out a way to sneak back in. A lot of unrest from a lot of people. White straight people are like, the gays are getting all the jobs, this is unfair. And you have all this violence and momentum and these warring factions, similar to kind of almost Nausicaä, where it's like you're just dropped in the middle of this without a lot of context. There's a lot of brilliance here when it comes to looking at the practicality of like intersectionality and the complexities of building a government where everyone is represented and everyone is seen. Even if all the momentum shifts one way, then you have the other people. Like, there's a lot here. I don't know if it sticks the landing with the conversation, but it's certainly interesting. And then finally watch Sally Potter's Orlando. Blown away. Truly, like, 5 stars instantly. What a poetic and beautiful look at identity, of gender, of time, of the power of a soul, going through history, making connections with people, building a family. There's so many sequences here where I could just get chills. I get chills of her running through the maze. I get chills of some of the conversations. The production design and the costumes and the hair and makeup obviously are incredible, as is just Tilda Swinton in general, maybe her best performance. But this is a film I have heard a lot about. Obviously, really recommend Orlando, My Political Biography, I believe it's called, the documentary about trans individuals who found a lot of power within this story. But the film itself, I was a little worried. I was like, what if it's a little bit underwhelming? But like, no, it exceeded expectations. Highly recommend anyone seeks this out. Definitely one of the best discoveries of the year for me. So with that, that's going to do it for today's episode of ClapperCast. Nick, where can we find you on social media?
You can find me on Instagram and Blue Sky at Nicky197, Letterboxd Nicolò Grasso, and you can follow my podcast, Anatomy of an Adaptation. The good Carson was recently a guest talking about Wild at Heart, so check it out on both Spotify, Apple, all the YouTube, all the usual places.
Have you done an episode on Orlando before?
I've not. I watched this film last year, I want to say, after I read the Virginia Woolf book. So maybe in the future, double convo on both the film and the documentary could be an interesting conversation to
If you
have.
get the right lineup for that, could be a great episode.
Yeah.
You can find me on Blue Sky and Letterboxd, just Carson Timar. Thank you so much for listening and watching. It turns out to be a big month here on the podcast. Not only do we have our Miyazaki series, we also have myself and Paul. We're doing a huge TV marathon episode. We're talking about The White Lotus. We're talking about Adolescence. We're talking about The Pit, and we're talking about The Studio. Big stuff coming out, and also on the Patreon, talking about The House of Yes. Please go watch that film again. Cannot stress enough. Watch it unspoiled and tune into our conversation because it's going to be very fun. And with all that said, thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.